What is going on YouTube and Diablo fans? My name's Andreas, and as always, welcome back to Mana and Motherboards. Today we have a super exciting video because the patch notes for the ladder season 14 have been released for Diablo 2 Reign of the Warlock. So I'm a little bit late to the party in doing my sort of rundown of the patch notes. I had a very busy weekend. Anyway, with all of that aside, let's jump right into the video, and there are some very cool changes, I must say. I have read through the patch notes already, but let's just go through it quickly together. I'll try and keep this video as brief as possible, but you know, there is a lot to go through. So firstly, just having a look at what's going on here. Season 14 is launching on the 22nd or 23rd of May, depending on where you are in the world. So in North America, it will be at 5 p.m. on May 22nd, and in Europe, it will be May 23rd at around 2 a.m. in the morning. So for me, I believe it's going to be about 2 a.m. when it resets and launches. So I'm probably only going to play when I wake up in the morning, which would probably be about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, something like that. So I'll miss a couple hours in the beginning, but anyway, that is what it is. I can't change that. And then in Asia, it will be at 8 a.m. So it seems like America and Asia definitely have it best when it comes there. So something just to note and remember when you are sort of upgrading to the new season and starting the new season is all of your current gear that you have earned in season 13 will then go to your non-ladder characters, so the Eternal Realm characters. So you just need to make space in your stash and make sure you click this little I think it says past, you know, something like that. You need to click that button, and then all of your seasonal loot will go over to your non-seasonal characters. So it just goes over that in this little sort of paragraph over here, so you can just look into that, and it's just something to note that you do get all of your gear from seasonal to your non-seasonal characters, that you don't lose out on that, and it will rewrite your past seasonal transfer from season 12. So if you haven't already transferred your season 12 stuff, do that so that you don't lose your items or they get rewritten with the season 13 ones. So on the quick patch 3.2 overview, Blizzard says that they deeply appreciate the community participation in the public test realm, and their main thing is maintaining the uniquely iconic feel of Diablo 2 and making it feel like Diablo 2, and it wouldn't be possible without the interaction with us. So just on that, it's really important to know that all of these videos we make, everything we do as a community, it is something that Blizzard do listen to, and it is important for them to get feedback on the PTR and things like that so that they can better tune Diablo 2 to its consumers, which is us and the players and just the general community. So I'm happy that they have taken the feedback from the PTR at heart, and that they have actually sort of listened and made changes in accordance to what everyone has sort of said and the content that was created on the PTR. And I think it's very important to know that they're not going to keep the Warlock like it was in Season 13, where it was just absolutely so overpowered. They need to keep Diablo 2 feeling like Diablo 2. This is how the game has been for 2.5 decades. They don't want to make it a completely new, completely different game. They need to keep that core essence of what Diablo 2 is in order for Diablo 2 to continue its sort of reign as the king of ARPGs, in my opinion, and keep that iconic feel and aesthetic that is Diablo 2. So they have Diablo 4 that they can tweak. They don't want it to be Diablo 3 or Diablo 4. They need to keep Diablo 2 as Diablo 2, and I'm glad that they mention this because it is so important, and it is just a core philosophy that needs to be the root and the foundation for any changes that they do make in Diablo 2. They need to make sure that they don't mess up the game and that they don't go too far down a rabbit hole of, like, let's say adding greater rifts or like sort of crazy other mechanics and systems that they could implement in their other Diablo franchise games instead. They need to keep Diablo 2 Resurrected at its core, Diablo 2. So jumping into the Warlock patch notes now. So the Warlock can equip two-handed weapons in one hand if they're using a Grimoire, so that's what we saw in the PTR. You can't use shields like Spirit or Phoenix anymore with a two-handed weapon, and that's what it just mentions here. And then they changed the health potion effectiveness from 100 to 150 because the health potions weren't actually effective with the large health pool that the Warlock had, and this was just a mistake or oversight that they didn't implement with the Season 13 that they have now changed for Season 14. So for the Sigil Lethargy skill, they removed the damage taken stat, which was that minus physical resistance that we saw in the PTR. So it doesn't minus physical resistance anymore. It's basically a tool for crowd control, as well as more attack rating to hit your enemies, and it's just still a great skill even without that damage taken stat. And they also fixed an issue where it did not affect hostile players for PvP. Then moving on to Ring of Fire, they reduced the base maximum damage scaling from 12 to 10, so what you could say that's sort of like a 20% or something like that sort of change. So at level 1 it's 12 to 10 damage now, or it was 12 damage, it's now 10 damage, and then at level 20 it's 181 damage, it's now 175. So I think that Ring of Fire was an absolutely overpowered leveling skill. It wasn't really used in the end game, but during the leveling process it really just absolutely decimated everything on screen. It was such a powerful skill, and I'm glad that they have reduced the effectiveness a bit of it. And even with the nerfs and the changes that have been made to it in terms of its damage, I still think it's going to be a great leveling tool at the moment. So they also reduced the damage scaling of Flame Wave by about 15%, so that goes from 17 to 23 at level 1 to now 14 to 19. And I think Ring of Fire, oh, not Ring of Fire, Flame Wave was in a good spot, and this slight nerf to it isn't really going to affect it very much. I think it's still going to be a very powerful skill for the Warlock Fire builds. Then for Apocalypse, they fixed an issue where the visuals would sometimes be duplicated for other players, just a bug fix there. Then for Miasma Bolt, they reduced the direct hit damage scaling, the base damage scaling. So instead of at level 1 going from 1 to 3, it is now 1 to 2, so that's sort of 1/3 less damage. And at level 20 it's 36 to 53, now is 22 to 25. So it's got great average damage, but it is reduced almost by half at level 20. And I think there were a lot of cases where like a 1.1 Miasma Bolt could still do content in Nightmare, maybe even into Howl, so it was a bit strong. And they also fixed an issue where there was extra instances of damage that were applied when the cloud expired, so there was a lot of bugs going on, as well as like next hit delays and things like that, the cloud bolt delays, and all of these things that were going on in the background mechanics of Miasma Vault that just made it a bit overpowered. So they've just reverted a couple of the changes, and they have reduced the damage. So overall, I think it's still going to be a great skill. I just think there were some bugs that needed to be addressed that made it a little bit overpowered. Moving on to Miasma Chains, they removed the casting delay, which I think was great. I think what they were trying to do with the magic skills and the Miasma skills for the Warlock was to give some sort of clunkiness or built-in sort of clunkiness to the whole mechanics of how it interacts, because magic damage is so powerful and so rarely met with immunities in the game. So I think what they tried to do is sort of build in some clunkiness so that it couldn't be too strong, because just like hammers spinning around and having that sort of like weird area of effect that they use, the same with the mechanics of like Miasma Chains, for instance, where you had to sort of position yourself very specifically to get the most damage out of them. And removing the casting delay I think is great because there was still a lot of finesse required in order to get the most out of the miasma chains. So they removed the casting delay and they changed the limit from, first of all, 3 to 5 in the PTR, and now they've made it from 5 to 10 active chains at once for Season 14, and I think that's very interesting. Even at your fastest cast rate breakpoint, getting 10 chains out is going to take quite a bit of time, and although doing tons of damage with 10 chains out, it does have a next hit delay. So for instance, just like Wake of Fire and other skills like that, like traps, even if you have 10 out, not all 10 are hitting all at the same time. So it's not like 10 suddenly stack to like this crazy amount of damage. There still is a next hit delay for each individual chain. So there's sort of no real point in getting all 10 out all at once, all at the same time. So I think that overall, the casting delay removal will make it a much more fluid skill to use, and I think even though you can have 10 chains out at the moment, with that next hit delay there still is a sort of like buffer for not doing like over the top amounts of damage. So a developer note here, the next hit delay only applies to clouds generated from a single chain. To be clear, a chain generates a new cloud stamp along the length of every chain every 0.5 seconds. So if a chain lasts 6 seconds, it will have generated 12 stamps of clouds that match its length. Those 12 clouds will have next hit delay between them. If I cast 10 chains, each generating 12 clouds over 6 seconds for a total of 120 seconds, monsters will take up to 10 instances of damage over those 10 seconds. Not like 120 as it would sort of seem. So next hit delay only applies to a single chain, not across all chains. So they also fixed an issue where extra clouds could be created and fixed an issue where chains would break using blade warp. So overall, I think miasma chains are going to be sort of a very much core part of the miasma magic build for the Warlock, and I think it's going to feel a lot more fluid and a lot more fun in the coming patch. So next up, Enhanced Entropy. They fixed an issue where the bonus to Abyss Radius did not increase from bonus skills, and they fixed an issue where the bonus to the radius was sometimes not reflected in the Miasma Bolt, Miasma Chains, and Abyss tooltip. So that's just some bug fixes that went on with Enhanced Entropy. So for Abyss, the maximum radius is capped at 11 yards. I can't remember if it was 9 or 11 yards in the PTR, but overall that is kind of a good spot and space that it's at. I think that is quite a fair size for such a powerful skill like Abyss. And they fixed an issue where Abyss would consume mana when it failed to cast, and it was a very mana intensive and mana hungry skill, so it's great that they fixed those issues. Then, just a developer note here, many of the changes to miasma skills are an attempt to bring the use of magic damage in line with other classes. With this damage type, there's typically some mitigating factors to its effectiveness that counters its lack of resistances from monsters. The original design of the miasma abilities was to have the slightly awkward mechanical approach of placing most of the damage in the cloud. So that is like what we talked about, where they tried to implement that mechanical awkwardness or that clunkiness into the skills so that it couldn't be so overpowered. So as we know, the Hamadin is one of the strongest characters in the game just because of its magic damage type and along with other aspects of it, but magic damage is a very incredibly powerful source of damage in the game, so they have to build around that so that it isn't too overpowered. So after addressing the bugs, the team felt that the mechanics did not sufficiently reach this threshold and have decided to introduce damage reduction. Based off community reception, we have opted to keep most of the previous damage values instead and watch to see if just the bug fixes reach the mechanical awkwardness we are aiming for. We will be keeping a close eye on miasma feedback to see whether future iterations are required to address how magic damage functions and how the Warlock fits into that puzzle. So miasma skills, magic damage skills are kind of a tightrope that they have to balance and walk across, and I think it's good that they are taking this sort of community feedback approach to how the miasma sort of build and skills function overall. So getting into the Eldritch skill tree, this is going to be an interesting one because of everyone's sort of two-edged sword jaded feel with Echoing Strike. So first up, Hexbane. They fixed an issue where the character stats page would not update after leveling up one of Hex's Bane's synergies and recasting the skill. So that's just a bug fix that was done for Hexbane. I will be back in 1 second. Just sorry about that. I just had to help my children in the house here quickly. So getting back into the Eldritch skill tree, for Cleave they fixed an issue where the skill would appear to cast slower than it actually was. So I think that's just an issue with the animation that they've fixed. Then the meat and potatoes that I think a lot of people are looking to see what's going on with, Echoing Strike. So they increased the percentage of weapon damage from 75% weapon damage to 90%. I think this will help quite substantially with the lack of physical damage that Echoing Strike was doing. Echoing Strike relied very heavily on Hex Purge in the PTR in order to do any sort of damage. Its physical damage was lacking substantially, so I think that's a great step in the right direction to improve the damage. Overall, I don't think Echoing Strike was in the worst spot, but it was substantially weaker than it was in Season 13. So this will change a lot, but I mean, if you can have a look at my PTR videos of Echoing Strike to gauge what this sort of difference could potentially be for Season 13. So they also fixed an issue where damage bonuses were combining multiplicatively instead of additively. We know that, and that sort of is why it went from doing so much damage to 10 times less damage, because that multiplicative sort of addition of its damage was, or multiplication of its damage was making it do about 10 times more damage than it was supposed to. So instead of doing 200k damage or 400k damage, you'll do 20k or 40k. So I think that is putting Echoing Strike into the realm of reality there. So they also fixed an issue where Echoing Strike would always hit, so now you need AR to hit with Echoing Strike. We did experience that in the PTR. The developers note here, based off the feedback from the PTR, we took another look at the decision to fix the bug for durability loss on Echoing Strike. While it was a bug, the feedback made us re-examine the impact to players' decisions around weapon choices. After discussions, we decided to revert the fix as the impact supported the intended fantasy of the skill while still fitting generally within the original vision. So what that means is, where we were able in Season 13 to use ethereal weapons without losing durability with Echoing Strike, for the PTR they changed it so that you couldn't use ethereal weapons because they would lose durability. Now they are going back to us being able to use ethereal weapons with Echoing Strike, which, coupled with that weapon damage of 75% to 90%, I think will sort of give us a good increase in the physical damage aspect of Echoing Strike. I think it still will heavily rely on Hex Purge or even Hexbane, but I think that this is a step in the right direction and will still be a very powerful build and skill for the Warlock. So Eldritch Blast has moved on to, or not moved on, Eldritch Blast has now had its lifesteal reduced from 20% to, and mana steal from 20% to 5%. I think that is good. 20% mana and life leech was just incredibly overpowered. It was not realistic at all. For Mirrored Blades, they fixed an issue where Mirrored Blades did not display attack rating on the character screen. They fixed the issue where the tooltip did not display the granted attack rating bonus, and an issue where the skill would not repeatedly cast when the button was held down on controller. They also fixed issues where the first missile when using Mirrored Blades with a bow or crossbow was getting the modified damage meant only for mirrors. Sorry, 1 second. Excuse me for that interruption again. Today it is storming outside, so the children didn't go to school, so I'm dadding and all of that in the background. So anyway, moving on, Mirrored Blades had a whole bunch of bug fixes. Then for the demon skill tree now, so Summon Tainted, and this was an incredibly powerful build in the PTR. Please have a look at my video on the Summon Tainted build. I'm sure it's going to be very exciting for a lot of you. So they reduced the damage synergy from Blood Boil from 30% to 20%. So in Season 13, the synergy from Blood Boil didn't work at all. So you wouldn't get any bonus to your Tainted skill by putting points into Blood Boil, and then they fixed it so that the synergy did apply in the PTR. And with that synergy, you could get to about 40 to 50k damage per Tainted. So that was 3 Tainted summoned doing 50k damage each, would be about 150k fire damage that was being outputted from these Tainted. And they changed that skill from 30% synergy damage bonus to 20%. I think that's roughly fair, maybe still a bit on the powerful side. I would have thought 15 to 10% would have been accurate, but I think 20% will put us in a good spot. With these changes being noted and said, this is going to be the build that I am going to be starting with in Season 14. I'll probably do a fire build into a Tainted build, and this is where I'm going to be focusing my attention, because it is an absolutely incredible build, a whole lot of fun, and just great for so many different sort of types of content in the game. So they've reduced that from 30 to 20%. We'll see how that works. I think it's still going to be incredibly powerful. And they fixed an issue where the damage synergy from Blood Boil did not apply. That's what I mentioned when in Season 13 it didn't affect the damage of Tainted at all. They also fixed an issue where the skill did not count as fire skills for the purposes of bonus levels from items. So if you were using Mage Fist that gave you plus to fire skills, or you were using what is that helm with Vex? I can't even remember what it's called right now. Flickering Flame. Is it Flickering Flame? Anyway, that helm gave you plus 3 to fire skills. That would then not apply to Tainted. It didn't consider Tainted as a fire skill. Now it does, which is fantastic. So that again, even though they've reduced the damage, fixing this will still put it up there as one of the most powerful builds in the game. And they also fixed an issue where the attack speed increase did not display on the tooltip. So you could increase the damage output and attack speed of your Tainted through increased attack speed. So for Bind Demon, there is a developer's note. Sorry, just to jump back, I'm so excited for this Tainted build. It's going to be fantastic in Season 14. Please consider that when you're choosing a build for the Warlock. So for Bind Demon, developer's note, they decided to leave the benefit of soft points granting modifiers for Bind Demon in place. So basically, when you put soft points into Bind Demon through your skillers, through your gear, all of that stuff, at every 5 soft point investment into Bind Demon, it will get a different affix that is applied, such as like Spectral Hit or Aura Enchanted or whatever it is with the soft points. So they kind of brought that back instead of it being unintentionally bugged during the PTR, and yeah, it's good that they have sort of reverted that back. I think that's great, and it gives a good balance. And now the requirements of base skill points investment to bind demons is level 10 hard points to bind a champion, level 15 to bind a unique, level 20 to bind a super unique. And they added a cap to max health, which varies by demon. I mean, you don't want a demon that can just tank Ubers by itself, so I think that is important. They also changed the synergy for chance to bind demon from Deathmark. It's reduced from 1% to 0.5%, and they reverted to the pre-PTR value. They introduced the max health cap, which we mentioned, and they further increased it as was seen in the PTR. And the overall chances to bind demon has been reduced, and it was incredibly difficult to bind a demon in the PTR, and I think that so it now starts at 20% where it was previously 10%, and diminishes leading towards 56%, which was previously 50%. Basically, it's going to be a little bit easier to bind your demons now. It was too difficult in the PTR and just took a whole lot of time. I didn't mind it too much personally, but a lot of the community was complaining about that. And they've also added an audio cue for players so that they can know if they will not succeed while attempting to bind a demon. That's quite interesting, quite cool. So demons with the aura enchanted modifiers now always replace their auras with new auras when bound. So we went through this before. these are now the auras that you can have on your demon. You can no longer have all the other ones that are available to demons in the game. These are the 7 auras that you can have. So basically Holy Freeze works really nicely with your cursed demons for Echoing Strike. Fanaticism works great, concentration, vigor is fun, thorns can also be played in interesting ways. Overall, I think this is quite a good change, because Echoing Strike and Cursed was applying way too often, making it way too powerful. Now you have that chance for it to be sort of only really usable with Holy Freeze, to proc it more often, and I think it just puts it in a much more realistic space. So as mentioned here, reduce the curse modifier's chance to cast amplify damage from 75 to 5%. Before it used to have a 75% chance to proc amp damage. Now it's only 5%, and it procs a lot more with Holy Freeze. It's the only aura that can help you proc this at a sort of reasonable level, so you need to find a monster with Holy Freeze and Cursed, or bind it in a specific way. So the mana cost is reduced to 9 per second. It did take a lot of mana to try and bind your demons. Now, again, this is just what level base points it is to bind specific tiers of demons. Super uniques require more damage taken before they can be bound. Added the audio cue, reduced the bonus chance to bind. A damaging bonus is further reduced. Okay, fixed an issue. Okay, so now where Bind Demon used to roll 12 times per second to see if it would bind a demon, and now only rolls once. That's why it is so much more difficult to bind demons. Okay, they basically just fixed that as in the PTR. So for Blood Boil, this is quite a big change, and it does also relate to that Tainted Bolt we were talking about. So for the PTR, they had the radius, I think, at 4 yards maximum cap, which was like a super melee sort of area of effective damage. You had to teleport, or what's it called, send in your demons and basically use them like melee demons to get your Blood Boil damage off at 4 yards that it was in the PTR. They've now changed that to 5 yards at level 4 or 1 to 4, and 6 yards at level 5 to 9, 7 yards at level 10. So effectively it's almost doubled its radius, which I think is good because it was way too small before. So that also plays into that Tainted build, because when you encounter fire immunes with the Tainted build, you will then use Blood Boil, which you have already put points into as a synergy in order to take out those immunes. So that's going to be a great tool and a great skill to use with the Tainted build. And in general, I think Blood Boil is now going to be in a good spot to be a build on its own, although I think with Tainted, why would you just go Blood Boil? You should just use the Tainted as well, personally. So for Engorge, the attack speed bonus now is skill based instead of item based. Okay. Demonic Mastery, Max Demons. Okay, this is the same as we saw it in the PTR here. For Blood Oath, damage taken goes to your demon stat change to use diminishing scaling. So 3% at level 1, 25% at level 20. So instead of being like 60% at level 20, it's now going to be 25%. And they fixed an issue where the damage taken goes to your demon stat would not benefit from bonus skills. So Blood Oath, I think, is just more balanced and in a better spot than it was, where it was quite overpowered before, and there were some tooltip bugs that said you took less damage than you actually did. I think it's just all bug fixed there and in a better spot. So for Consume, they adjusted many of the bonuses. Bonuses will now scale based on the difficulty of the demon that it was consumed or created on. For example, a demon from Hull difficulty will grant a higher bonus than one from normal difficulty. So with all of those skills going on with the Warlock and the changes going on there, I think the Warlock's going to be so much more balanced. I think Fire and the Tainted build are going to be probably the best builds in the game for the Warlock in Season 14. I think Abyss might be just behind that. Maybe Blood Boil and Abyss, or Blood Boil and the magic damage, miasma damage sort of skills, those will all be pooled together sort of in A tier. I think Tainted and Fire will be S tier, and Echoing Strike might be B tier, something like that. Those are just my predictions. So moving on to the Terror Zones, I think the changes that happen with the Warlock are great. I think that, sorry, just jumping back and forth here, I think the changes that they did with the Warlock are great, and I think that they have taken, Blizzard have taken quite a measured hand in how they have tweaked and changed it, and I think it's just going to be so much more well-rounded and so much more in line with the other current characters in Diablo 2 Resurrected. So for Terror Zones, they said that Heralds are their core attempt to mitigate the dissatisfying experiences related to Sundered Charms prior to the reign of Warlock. At launch, it's clear that we overcorrected the experience by making both Heralds and Sundered Charms too rare. The changes in the PTR attempted to address this overcorrection but introduce other undesirable impacts. This next iteration aims to find the middle ground of increasing Herald's appearance at pacing that does not create an undesirable gameplay loop. In the PTR, we experimented with an increased chance for Heralds to drop a valuable item if Sundered Charms did not drop. This quickly proved to be too lucrative and have since been removed. I mean, you were finding like rainbow facets and like unique jewelry way too often in the PTR with the changes they made. So Sundered Charms have instead been integrated into existing item tables for Heralds, which also makes hunting higher tier Heralds more impactful as Heralds drop more items at higher tiers. We want item drops to feel rewarding, but not break the chase for items that players know and love in Diablo 2. That is one of the best parts of Diablo 2, is that item grind and item chase for those GG godly items. So I'm glad that they are trying to balance and keep that in a good spot. So the chance to drop Wallstone Shards is no longer modified by player count, so we'll find a lot more Wallstone Shards and be able to terrorize the game at a better rate as we so choose. They increased the chance to drop latent Sundered Charms from Heralds to now from tier 1 instead of tier 4, so you can sort of get a greater chance to drop these Sundered Charms right as you start farming Heralds instead of just at tier 4 and 5. They increased the chance to drop latent Sundered Charms from Heralds and is no longer affected by player count. So again, this is just for you guys who prefer to play solo, or even online by yourself. It's just no longer affected greatly by player count. So Heralds at T3 and 4 have twice the increased drop chances of Sundered Charms, and at tier 5 they have 3 times the increased drop chances. So it does reward you for chasing higher tier Heralds for those Sundered Charms. Also, latent Sundered Charms can now drop from any monster, terrorized and non-terrorized, using Magic Find. Again, I am not the biggest fan of Sundered Charms in the game, but you know, it's something that I think is here to stay. And now they have moved it from not only terrorized zoned or terrorized monsters to anywhere in the game. I think that is alright, although maybe we'll see. I found 2 Sundered Charms in a week of playing the PTR. I didn't find any in 2 months of playing Season 13, so I don't know if you can call that balanced or not, but we'll see what that's like. They fixed the Herald of Terror's Thorns aura procs twice for every player hit. Okay, slightly reduced the chance for Heralds to drop unique, set and rare items. So developers note this change makes Heralds match super unique monsters and should prevent them from feeling like loot goblins, rolling excessive amounts of rainbow facets and unique jewelry. So like I mentioned, yeah, Heralds now spawn and hunt players upon killing any monster in a terror zone, and the chance for a Herald to hunt you is increased with each monster killed within the same terror zone. So the more you kill, the more Heralds you will find, and it sort of scales linearly with that. Developers note in PTR we saw tier 1 and 2 T2 Heralds spawning too frequently, and tier 3 to 5 spawning not as frequently as we intended. To address this, we have made the spawn rates more uniform, and when using shards and performing consecutive full zone clears, we saw a double in the total amount of Heralds in the game from 30 to 40 to 70 to 90. We also placed in protections to prevent the double spawning of Heralds at the same time. A lightning storm will now appear on top of the slain monster when a Herald is about to spawn. You have 5 seconds to prepare. This is great, especially for hardcore characters, because in the PTR, when you'd kill a pack and the herald would spawn, you kind of didn't know when it would spawn, and it could spawn right on top of you. And as we know, heralds were incredibly powerful and probably some of the hardest monsters in the game to kill, and doing a lot of damage. So especially for hardcore characters, this was a bit unfair. So we now have that lightning storm to appear that will indicate that a herald is coming. So I think that's a good move by Blizzard. Then heralds tiers now increase when a herald is spawned instead of when a herald is killed. They reduce the difficulty of heralds above tier 1, so where they used to have 500% health, they now have 250%, and I think that is fantastic because they took way too long in the PTR to kill. Their health pool was ridiculously high, and their damage bonus per tier is reduced from 50% to 25%. I also think that's fair because they were at times one-shotting even very tough characters. They then fixed an issue where the Thorns aura from heralds would hit twice. So I think heralds are going to be in a much better spot than they were before. All of these changes seem to balance out terror zones and heralds a lot nicer, as well as the drop chances of Sundered Charms. I think that they've done a great job in balancing this, and we'll see in Season 14 if that is actually true, but it sounds like it is headed in the right direction. So they've also made Colossal Ancients a lot harder now. They now drop from non-terrorized act bosses, so you can find your ancient statues from any act boss now. They also have changed the summons to continuously spawn up to a cap of 5 instead of just kill the 5 and they're done. They increased the magic resistance of each colossal from 50 to 75%, probably because of the miasma skills and just general magic damage resistances. They have then increased the damage of Talix Whirlwind, the damage of Talix Fire Twisters, the damage of Corlix Coldfisher, and the damage of Maddox Thunderstorm. So I think this is trying to push you to prepare more for the Colossal Ancients instead of just go in there with any gear that you had before. I think they've made it a bit tougher, and you're going to have to stack resistances a bit more and be more specific with your build and your gear when encountering the Colossal Ancients. So I think this is quite a good change that they've made. And with the developer note, they've heard that the feedback that the Colossal Ancients were too easy for some builds. We believe that combining adjustments to the Colossal Ancients survivability and damage with adjustments to certain player skills will create a fair difficulty increase. I think that sounds correct and good. So these last little changes they've done is just little bug fixes for keyboard movement. They have reintroduced WASD for movement, fixed some fixes or bug fixed some Chronicle issues, loot filter issues, stash issues, user interface, console, miscellaneous, all of that good stuff. So overall, I think taking this all in a nutshell, the Warlock has been even further balanced. I think it's going to be much more in line with the current characters in Diablo 2 Resurrected. Heralds and Terror Zones are in a much better spot. There's going to be better build diversity for the Warlock and better build balance so that it's not echoing strike or nothing basically. There's going to be fire build, tainted build, blood boil, echoing strike, possibly even mirror blades with bows, and there's just a lot more sort of coherency with the Warlock currently with these intended changes for Season 14. I know this video is quite long, and I think there's just a lot of exciting stuff going on from Season 13 to 14, so I was excited to go through the patch notes with you. Definitely stay tuned for coming content on Diablo 2 Resurrected. We are going to be kicking off the season hard when it launches on the 23rd of May, and we are so excited to jump into this with you guys and expect daily content when that new season drops. There will be build guides, farming, all of the excited stuff going on. So if you haven't already and you do enjoy this content, please consider subscribing, and any likes, shares, views, comments, all of that sort of stuff is very much appreciated, and as we see, Blizzard do listen to it. And stay tuned, we will see you again for some more Mana and Motherboards. Cheers!